The lunch rush had just ended at the Ivory Room, one of those fancy restaurants in the heart of the city where a single meal cost more than what most people earned in a day. The kind of place where celebrities and business moguls came to be seen, where the silverware was always polished to a mirror shine, and where the staff moved with practiced precision, almost invisible to the guests they served. Among them was Lily Chen, a slender woman with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face a practiced mask of pleasant efficiency. She cleared plates from table 12 with the quiet grace she had perfected over 3 years of working double shifts. "Another coffee for the gentleman at table 7, the manager whispered as he passed by. Lily nodded, her tired eyes briefly glancing toward the grand piano that sat in the corner of the dining room. It was Thursday, which meant Vincent would be arriving soon to play for the dinner crowd. The piano was already gleaming under the soft lighting, recently polished by the morning cleaning crew. Nobody at the Ivory Room knew that Lily once had her own grand piano. Nobody knew that her fingers had once danced across ivory keys to standing ovations. To them, she was just another waitress, reliable, pleasant, forgettable. "Order up," called the chef, and Lily turned away from the piano. She had gotten good at pushing away those thoughts. Good at pretending that the music floating through the restaurant didn't make her fingers twitch at her sides, remembering patterns they had practiced thousands of times before. The dinner crowd began to filter in around 5. Thursday nights were always packed, partly because of Vincent's playing, partly because some important food critic had once mentioned the Ivory Room in an article about hidden gems 3 years ago. Now it wasn't so hidden, and reservations were booked months in advance. Lily moved between tables with practiced ease, balancing plates of tiny, artistic food arrangements that cost more than she made in an hour. She had memorized the wine list, could recite the day's specials in her sleep, and knew exactly how to fade into the background when important conversations were happening at her tables. "Did you hear who's coming tonight?" whispered May, another server, as they both stood by the kitchen door waiting for orders. Lily shook her head, adjusting her bow tie. "Thomas Wright," May said with wide eyes. "The director of the National Symphony Orchestra. Table 9. And he's bringing half the board with him." Something cold slipped down Lily's spine. The name was familiar, too familiar. She had once auditioned for him 6 years ago, when she was still a student at the music conservatory. "Before everything fell apart, you okay?" May asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Fine," Lily said quickly. "Just tired. Double shift yesterday." Before May could respond, the kitchen bell rang and they both moved to collect their orders. Lily was grateful for the interruption. She couldn't explain to May or anyone else why hearing that name affected her so much. How could she explain that in another life she might have been playing for people like Thomas Wright, instead of serving them overpriced salmon? The evening progressed as usual. Lily moved on autopilot, smiling at the right moments, reciting specials, bringing extra bread, all while carefully avoiding looking directly at table 9. She had caught a glimpse of Thomas Wright when he entered. Older now, his beard more gray than black, but still with that same intense look in his eyes. The look that had once made her knees shake during her audition. He hadn't recognized her. Why would he? She had been one of hundreds of hopeful young musicians he had evaluated over the years. And besides, the Lily who had played Chopin for him 6 years ago looked nothing like the waitress who now poured his water. That Lily had worn her hair long and loose, had stood tall and proud despite her nerves. That Lily had believed she could conquer the world with music. This Lily wore a stiff uniform and sensible shoes that wouldn't hurt after standing for 12 hours. Around 7, Vincent arrived for his usual performance. He nodded politely to the staff as he made his way to the piano. Vincent was in his 60s, with gentle eyes and hands that showed their age but still produced beautiful music. Lily had always liked him. He played with feeling, unlike some of the technically perfect but emotionally empty performers she had known at the conservatory. "Evening. Lily," he said as he passed her. "Evening." Vincent, it was their usual exchange, brief but genuine. Sometimes Lily wondered if Vincent somehow sensed her secret. He had caught her looking at the piano more than once but had never commented on it. Vincent settled at the piano and began to play something soft and classical. Debussy, Lily recognized immediately. The conversations in the restaurant continued over the music, most patrons treating it as pleasant background noise rather than something worthy of attention, except for table 9. Lily noticed that Thomas Wright had stopped talking and was listening, his head slightly tilted. He had always appreciated good music. At least that hadn't changed. The night continued, and Lily tried to focus on her work rather than the music or the memories it stirred. It was nearly 9 when disaster struck. Vincent, in the middle of a Beethoven sonata, suddenly stopped playing. The abrupt silence drew attention from nearby tables. Lily, who was refilling water glasses at a table close to the piano, looked over to see Vincent pressing a hand to his chest, his face pale and drawn in pain. She put down her water pitcher and moved toward him without thinking. "Vincent?" she asked quietly. "Are you okay?" He shook his head slightly. "Heart," he managed to say. "Medicine?" "Coat pocket in the break room." Lily turned immediately. "May," she called softly but urgently to her coworker. "Call an ambulance. Vincent needs help." As May pulled out her phone, Lily hurried to the break room. She found Vincent's coat hanging neatly by the door and searched the pockets until she found a small pill bottle. She rushed back just as the manager was helping Vincent to a chair away from the piano. "His medicine," Lily said, handing over the bottle. The manager helped Vincent take one of the pills while Lily brought him a glass of water. "Ambulance is on the way," May reported quietly. The manager, Peter, looked panicked, not just for Vincent's health, but for the disruption to the evening. The Ivory Room prided itself on perfect, seamless experiences. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peter addressed the nearby tables with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Our pianist is taking a short break. Please continue to enjoy your meals." But the mood had shifted. The absence of music left a noticeable void, and concerned glances were being cast toward Vincent, who was still pale but breathing more easily. Peter pulled Lily and May aside. "This is a disaster," he whispered. "The Wright Party is here to discuss hosting their annual fundraiser gala with us. They specifically mentioned the importance of the music program." "Vincent needs to go to the hospital," Lily said firmly. Of course," Peter said quickly. "But I wonder if we could get a replacement on such short notice." "On a Thursday night. All the good musicians in town are already booked," May pointed out. Peter ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Well, we have to do something." Wright and his party looked concerned, and they were about to discuss the booking details for an event worth thousands to us. Lily bit her lip, her heart hammering in her chest. A voice inside her, one she thought had been silenced years ago, was suddenly screaming to be heard. "I can play," she said, so quietly that Peter asked her to repeat herself. "I can play," she said again, her voice stronger. "The piano. I can fill in until the end of the night." Peter and May both stared at her as if she had suggested she could fly. "You?" Peter finally asked. "You play piano?" Lily nodded, ignoring the slight note of disbelief in his voice. "I studied at the conservatory." "The conservatory," Peter repeated slowly. "And you're waiting tables because—" "It's complicated," Lily said, not wanting to get into her life story while Vincent needed medical attention and the restaurant was in crisis. "But I can play whatever you need, to classical, jazz, contemporary. Vincent's repertoire is fairly standard." Peter looked doubtful, but at that moment the paramedics arrived and began attending to Vincent. The disruption was drawing even more attention now. "Look," Lily said urgently, "what's the worst that could happen? If I'm terrible, you can just say the music is done for the night. But if I'm good, you save the Wright booking." Peter glanced over at table 9 where Thomas Wright was watching the scene with interest. "Fine," he said finally. "But Lily, don't embarrass us." She nodded, suddenly feeling a rush of nerves. It had been 3 years since she had played for anyone. 3 years of locking away that part of herself, of pretending she was fine with the life she had now. As the paramedics helped Vincent toward the exit, he caught Lily's eye and gave her a questioning look. She moved closer to him. "I'm going to fill in," she explained softly. "I'll take good care of your piano." A look of surprise crossed his face, followed by understanding and then a small smile. "Third shelf in the bench," he said weakly. "All my sheet music. Though something tells me you might not need it." Lily squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you. Now go get better." After Vincent was taken away, Lily took a deep breath and walked toward the piano. She could feel eyes on her. The staff, the customers, Peter's worried gaze, and somewhere in the mix, Thomas Wright, the man who had once told her she had remarkable potential right before she had to give it all up. She sat down on the bench, adjusted it slightly for her shorter height, and placed her hands on the keys. They looked wrong there, her nails cut short for practical work, a small burn on one knuckle from the coffee machine last week. Not the hands of a concert pianist anymore, but as she closed her eyes and began to play the first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune, picking up exactly where Vincent had left off his set, she felt something lock into place, something that had been misaligned for 3 long years. And as the music flowed from her fingers, filling the suddenly silent restaurant, Lily Chen remembered who she used to be. The first notes of Clair de Lune floated through the ivory room like gentle raindrops, soft yet impossible to ignore. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Heads turned toward the piano where Lily sat, still in her black and white waitress uniform, her eyes closed as her fingers moved across the keys with the familiarity of coming home. For the first minute, the restaurant remained in stunned silence. This wasn't the pleasant background music that Vincent usually provided. This was something else entirely, something raw and beautiful that demanded attention. Lily barely noticed. She was lost in the music, in the feeling of cool ivory beneath her fingertips after so long away. Each note was both a memory and a rediscovery. She had played this piece hundreds of times before, but never quite like this. Never with 3 years of bottled-up longing finding its release. As she finished the Debussy piece, she opened her eyes briefly and was startled by what she saw. Every face in the restaurant was turned toward her. The waitstaff stood frozen, trays in hand. Even the kitchen door was propped open with several cooks peering out. And at table 9, Thomas Wright was leaning forward, his dinner forgotten, a strange expression on his face, something between confusion and recognition. Lily quickly looked away and moved smoothly into her next piece, a Chopin nocturne that had once been her go-to for calming pre-performance nerves. She needed that calm now as she felt the weight of all those eyes upon her. This wasn't the faceless crowd of a concert hall, safely blurred by stage lights. These were people she had served coffee to, people whose conversations she had carefully avoided overhearing, people who until moments ago had looked through her as if she were invisible. Now they were seeing her, really seeing her, perhaps for the first time. Peter approached the piano during a brief pause between pieces, bending to whisper in her ear. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," he said, his previous skepticism replaced with barely contained excitement. "Table 9 is loving it. Wright just ordered another bottle of the 82 Bordeaux." Lily nodded, her fingers never leaving the keys as she transitioned into a gentle Mozart piece. She wondered what Peter would say if she told him she had once performed this same piece at Carnegie Hall as a student, that the sheet music for it was still in a box under her bed in her tiny apartment, along with competition medals and old programs bearing her name. As she played, she allowed herself to glance occasionally at the diners. Their reactions fascinated her. An older couple held hands across their table, eyes closed in appreciation. A young woman was recording on her phone. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit had tears in his eyes that he quickly wiped away when he noticed Lily looking. And Thomas Wright was still watching her with that same perplexed expression, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Lily turned her attention back to the music. She had been playing safe choices, beautiful but not too challenging pieces that any competent pianist could handle. Part of her wanted to keep it that way, to provide lovely background music and then return to being invisible once Vincent recovered. But another part of her, a part that had been silenced for 3 years, was awakening. That part wanted to play something that would make them remember this night, something that would make Thomas Wright stop looking puzzled and start remembering where he had seen her before. Her hands paused for just a moment. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was a bold choice, a complex, emotionally demanding piece that had once been her showcase, the piece she had played for her final recital at the conservatory before everything fell apart. It was also not the kind of piece one typically heard in restaurants, even upscale ones like the Ivory Room. This was concert hall music, meant to be supported by an entire orchestra, but Lily's hands filled in the gaps, suggesting the missing instruments through changes in touch and tone, through the complex interplay between her left and right hands. The first dramatic chord silenced any remaining conversation in the restaurant. Lily could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the way the music commanded attention, but she didn't look up. She couldn't. This piece required every ounce of her concentration, every bit of skill she had worked so hard to develop and had then abandoned. She was rusty. She knew that. 3 years without regular practice had taken its toll. Her fingers stumbled once or twice on particularly technical passages. But what she lacked in recent practice, she made up for an emotional connection. This piece had always spoken to her. Its journey from darkness to triumph, its moments of tender beauty amid dramatic intensity. As she played, memories flooded back. Hours spent practicing until her fingers cramped. Her teacher's voice, "Again, Lily, from the beginning. Feel it more." Her mother's face beaming with pride at her first major recital. The letter of acceptance to the prestigious fellowship program, the one she had dreamed about since she was 12. And then the phone call that had changed everything. Her father's voice breaking as he told her about her mother's diagnosis. The choice that hadn't really been a choice at all. The fellowship declined. The apartment near the conservatory vacated, moving back home to become her mother's caregiver while her father worked 2 jobs to cover the mounting medical bills. The scholarship money that went toward treatments instead of tuition. The grand piano sold to pay for one more experimental procedure that the insurance wouldn't cover. And when it was all over, when her mother was gone despite everything they had sacrificed, the music world had moved on without her. Her moment had passed, the connections lost, the momentum vanished. She had answered an ad for waitstaff at the Ivory Room because it was close to her new, smaller apartment, and the pay was decent. She had said nothing about her musical background during the interview. It had seemed easier that way, to start fresh, to be someone new, someone without dreams that had been shattered. But now, as her fingers danced through Rachmaninoff's challenging passages, as she poured all of that grief and loss and longing into the music, she felt strangely whole again, as if the 2 halves of herself, the waitress who refilled water glasses and the musician who had once dreamed of concert halls, were finally meeting, acknowledging each other across the divide of 3 silent years. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice the chef emerge fully from the kitchen, didn't see the busboy set down his tub of dishes to listen, didn't register that May had pulled out her phone and was recording the performance. She didn't see Thomas Wright whispering urgently to his dinner companions, pointing in her direction, his food growing cold on his plate. She played on, losing herself in the music, in the story it told Marn, of struggle and darkness, of beauty rising from pain, of triumph hard-won but all the more precious for it. The Rachmaninoff had always felt personal to her, had always seemed to express things she couldn't put into words. Now, after all she had been through, it felt even more so. When she reached the final movement, she could feel energy building within her. Her back straightened, her chin lifted slightly. The tempo picked up, her hands flying across the keys with increasing intensity. The piece drove toward its conclusion with a sense of inevitability, of fate being met head-on rather than avoided. The final chords rang out, powerful and definitive. Lily's hands lifted from the keys and hovered there for a moment, as if reluctant to break the spell. Her breath came in short gasps. A single strand of hair had come loose from her neat bun and hung beside her face. She felt as if she had just run a marathon, exhausted but exhilarated. And then she became aware of the silence. Complete, utter silence. She opened her eyes slowly, suddenly afraid of what she might see. Had she gone too far? Had she broken some unspoken rule of restaurant entertainment by playing something so demanding, so emotionally raw? Would Peter be angry that she had drawn so much attention to herself? She looked up and found every eye in the restaurant fixed on her. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if time itself had stopped in the Ivory Room, caught in the gravity of what had just happened. And then, from table 9, Thomas Wright slowly rose to his feet. His expression was no longer puzzled. Now it was something else entirely, a look of wonder, of recognition. "My God," he said, his voice carrying in the silence. "It's you." The final notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 hung in the air like a spell cast over the Ivory Room. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. Not a single fork clinked against china. Not a single glass touched the table. The entire restaurant held its breath, caught in that magical moment when great art suspends time itself. Lily's hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She hadn't meant to play the entire concerto. She had intended to offer just a few pieces, enough to fill the gap Vincent had left. But once she started playing, something had awakened inside her, something that had been sleeping for 3 long years. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget, and the music had poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. And then, breaking the spell, someone began to clap. Lily opened her eyes to see Thomas Wright himself standing at his table, his napkin fallen forgotten to the floor, his hands coming together in a slow, deliberate applause. One by one, others joined him. First his companions, then nearby tables, then the entire restaurant erupting in thunderous applause that seemed impossibly loud for such an intimate space. Waiters stood frozen with trays in hand. The kitchen staff had emerged from behind the swinging doors, the head chef still holding a spatula. Even Peter, the ever-proper manager, was staring at her with his mouth slightly open. The applause continued, growing louder. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from across the room. Another voice called for an encore. Lily felt heat rush to her face. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to provide pleasant background music, not become the center of attention. For 3 years she had practiced the art of invisibility, of moving through rooms unnoticed, of being the person who refilled water glasses without interrupting conversations. Now, every eye in the room was fixed on her. She looked down at herself, at the simple black pants and white shirt of her uniform, at the small stain on her sleeve from where a customer had bumped her arm during soup service. She wasn't dressed for this moment. She wasn't prepared for this moment. "It is you," Thomas Wright said, moving toward the piano. The crowd parted for him automatically. He had that effect on people, the natural authority of someone who had spent decades at the top of his field. "Lily Chen, I remember you played this same piece for your fellowship audition." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You disappeared after that. Everyone thought you'd gone to study in Europe." Lily's throat felt dry. "No," she managed to say. "Not Europe." "You should have been," he replied. "That fellowship was yours. We were all shocked when you turned it down without explanation." A murmur ran through the restaurant. May, still holding her phone, was looking back and forth between Lily and Thomas with wide eyes. "I had family obligations," Lily said simply. She didn't want to get into the details of her mother's illness, her family's financial struggles, the impossible choices she had faced. Not here, not now, not with everyone watching. Those memories were still too raw, too private. Thomas nodded slowly, seeming to understand there was more to the story than she was saying. "And now you're here," he said, gesturing to the ivory room. "I'm here," Lily agreed, her hands falling into her lap. "Working as a waitress." "Yes." "When you play like that?" It wasn't a question, but Lily felt compelled to answer anyway. "Life happens," she said quietly. "We adapt." Thomas shook his head, a strange mix of emotions crossing his face. Disbelief, appreciation, perhaps a touch of guilt that he hadn't tried harder to find out what had happened to the promising young pianist who had vanished. "That's not adaptation, Miss Chen. That's burial. You've buried your gift." The words stung, partly because they held some truth. Hadn't she deliberately pushed her music aside? Hadn't she chosen this restaurant partly because it was far from the concert halls and music schools where she might be recognized? Hadn't she kept her past a secret from her coworkers, her neighbors, even the few friends she had made in her new life? "I still play," she said, though it wasn't entirely true. There was a small electronic keyboard in her apartment, but she rarely touched it. The sound was nothing like a real piano, and playing it only reminded her of what she had lost. Just not professionally. Until tonight, came a voice from the back of the crowd. Peter pushed his way forward. His professional demeanor recovered, though his eyes still held a hint of amazement. "Ms. Chen has been kind enough to fill in while our regular pianist Vincent receives medical attention." He turned to the restaurant at large. "Please, everyone, return to your meals. Perhaps Ms. Chen will favor us with another piece shortly." This was Peter's attempt to restore normalcy, to transform what had just happened into something that fit within the expected framework of restaurant entertainment. But it was too late for that. The barrier between performer and audience had already been broken by Thomas Wright's recognition, by the revelation that the waitress who had been serving them all evening was actually a concert-caliber pianist in disguise. People began to whisper to each other. Phones were pulled out. Lily heard fragments of conversations. "Did you get that on video?" And Google her name and fellowship program? Thomas turned back to Lily, lowering his voice. "We should talk." About where you've been, about where you could go from here. Before Lily could respond, a young woman approached the piano, her expression hesitant but determined. Lily recognized her as part of a couple celebrating an anniversary, seated at table 4. "Excuse me?" the woman said, her voice soft but clear. I don't have the right words. Beautiful doesn't cover it. My husband and we got engaged at a symphony concert playing that exact piece. Hearing you play it tonight, especially not expecting it in a restaurant of all places. It felt like a gift." She twisted her hands nervously. "Would it be possible? I know this is presumptuous, but could you play something else? Anything, just something more?" Lily looked past the woman to Peter, who nodded encouragingly. The dinner service was effectively paused anyway. The spell she had cast with Rachmaninoff had seen to that. She might as well lean into it. "Of course," she said, turning back to the piano. Her fingers found the keys again, and this time she chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Another piece she knew by heart. One that would ease the emotional intensity in the room while still showcasing the piano's rich voice. As she played, she was aware of Thomas Wright returning to his table, of waiters beginning to move again, of conversations resuming. But all of it now happening in relation to the music, not despite it. She had become the center of the ivory room in a way that Vincent, for all his skill, had never been. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. For 3 years she had lived a half-life, going through the motions without passion, doing what was necessary to survive but nothing more. Now, in the course of a single evening, the walls she had built between her past and present were crumbling. She played through the Beethoven piece and moved into a Schubert impromptu without pause, losing track of time, aware only of the music and the unusual quiet of the restaurant. No one wanted to talk over what was happening. Even the kitchen staff were moving with unusual care, plates being set down gently, voices kept to whispers. It was May who finally approached her, touching her shoulder lightly during a brief pause. "Lily," she whispered, "your video is blowing up." "My what?" May held out her phone. On the screen was a video titled, "Waitress Stuns Restaurant with Surprise Piano Performance." It had been uploaded less than 20 minutes ago and already had thousands of views, with the numbers climbing rapidly as Lily watched. "I didn't know if you'd want me to record it," May said, looking suddenly unsure. "But it was so amazing and no one would believe it if I just told them. I can take it down if you want." Lily stared at the screen, at the image of herself in her waitress uniform seated at the grand piano, her face transformed by music in a way she hadn't seen in a mirror for years. She should feel exposed, violated even. Her private moment of reconnection with her former self was now being shared with strangers across the internet. But strangely, she didn't feel that way at all. Instead, she felt something like relief, as if a secret she had been keeping even from herself was finally in the open. "It's okay," she told May. "You can leave it up." May broke into a wide smile. "Really? Because it's getting shared like crazy. Someone from Classical Music Today already commented asking for your contact information." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Classical Music Today was a major industry publication, one she had dreamed of being featured in during her conservatory days. The idea that they might be interested in her now after all this time seemed impossible. "You don't have to decide anything right now," came Thomas Wright's voice. He had approached again, this time with one of his dinner companions, a woman Lily recognized as the director of the city's most prestigious music academy. "But when you're finished here tonight, we'd like to talk to you about some possibilities." Possibilities. The word hung in the air, full of promise and uncertainty. 3 hours ago, Lily's only possibility had been whether she would pick up an extra shift on Saturday to help cover this month's rent. Now, "I'd like that," she said finally. "But first I think I should finish what I started." She turned back to the piano and began to play again, this time choosing a piece she had composed herself during her final year at the conservatory. It was technically less demanding than the Rachmaninoff, but more personal, more revealing. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt as though she were introducing herself to the room, not as Lily the waitress or even Lily the pianist, but simply as herself, a woman who had lost her way and might, just might, be finding it again. Outside the ivory room in the darkness of the city night, May's video continued to spread from phone to phone, screen to screen, gathering views and shares and comments. The story of the waitress who stepped to the piano was beginning to take on a life of its own. And Lily, lost in the music that had once been the center of her world, had no idea that by morning, everything would change. Lily woke to the insistent buzzing of her phone. She groaned and rolled over, squinting at the clock on her bedside table. 6:17 a.m. She had gotten home from the ivory room just after midnight, her mind too wired to sleep until nearly 3. Her hand fumbled for the phone, expecting an early text from Peter about her shift today. Instead, she found 37 missed calls, over 50 text messages, and more email notifications than she could count. Most of the calls were from numbers she didn't recognize, but a few were from May, and even one from Peter himself. She sat up, suddenly wide awake. Memory of the previous night flooded back. The piano, the applause, Thomas Wright's recognition, May's video, the video. She tapped on the notification from May that had come in just minutes ago. OMG Lily, check her video. 2.3 million views. Lily's stomach dropped. She quickly opened the video app and found the clip May had shared with her last night. The view counter now showed 347,856 and was climbing even as she watched. The comments section had exploded with thousands of reactions. Who is she? That's Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Professional level stuff. From serving dinner to serving perfection. The way everyone in that restaurant just stops. Best plot twist ever. When the conductor recognized her. Lily's hand shook as she scrolled through the comments. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had agreed to let May leave the video up, yes, but she hadn't expected it to go viral. She had expected a few hundred views at most, maybe a brief moment of local attention that would quickly fade. Not this. Not millions of strangers watching her most vulnerable moment, speculating about her life, hunting for her identity. Her phone buzzed again, another call from an unknown number. She declined it and opened her text messages instead. Most were from friends and former colleagues from the music world, people she hadn't spoken to in years. Is that really you? Lily Chen back at the piano. Call me ASAP, important opportunity to discuss. 3 major networks trying to reach you through me. And from May, a string of increasingly excited messages. Morning. Hope you're ready for this. CNN just called the restaurant asking about you. Peter says take the day off, media all over the place. Also check your email. Thomas Wright's assistant sent something marked urgent. Lily fell back against her pillows, overwhelmed. She had imagined last night might lead to something, perhaps a conversation with Thomas Wright, maybe even some small opportunity to reconnect with the music world. But she had pictured it happening slowly, privately, giving her time to adjust to the idea that her 2 separate lives were colliding. Instead, the collision had happened at the speed of the internet, viral and unstoppable. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, Peter this time. She answered it. Lily? Thank goodness. Are you okay? Have you seen what's happening? Some of it, she said, her voice still rough with sleep. May mentioned CNN? Peter laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. CNN is just the beginning. We've had calls from every major network, a dozen radio stations, at least 30 journalists. The restaurant phone hasn't stopped ringing since we opened. We've already booked every table for the next month. People hoping you'll play again. Lily closed her eyes. Peter, I know, you're just a waitress. You were filling in. It was a one-time thing. He paused. Except it doesn't have to be, Lily. Vincent called from the hospital this morning. His doctor is insisting on 6 weeks minimum recovery time after his heart scare. We need a pianist, you need a job. And honestly, after last night, I'd be crazy not to offer you the position. She sat up straighter. You want me to be the restaurant pianist? Not a waitress anymore? For now, yes. Though after last night, I suspect you'll have other offers coming in. Better ones. As if on cue, her email notification pinged again. I think they already are, she said quietly. Look, Peter continued, take the day off. Deal with whatever is happening. But I want you to know there's a place for you here if you want it. And Lily, what you did last night, it was extraordinary. I've been in the restaurant business for 27 years and I've never seen anything like it. After thanking Peter and ending the call, Lily finally opened her email. At the top was the message from Thomas Wright's assistant. She took a deep breath and tapped on it. Dear Ms. Chen, Mr. Wright has asked me to extend a formal invitation to meet with him today at your earliest convenience at Symphony Hall. He, believes your performance last night revealed a rare talent that deserves proper recognition and support. Several board members of the Symphony Orchestra Foundation were present at the Ivory Room and share his assessment. Please call my direct line below to arrange a time that works for you. With highest regards, Dana Morris, Executive Assistant to Thomas Wright. Lily read the message twice, trying to process what it meant. Symphony Hall, the board, proper recognition and support. These were words from her old life, from her abandoned dreams. She set her phone down and got out of bed, moving to the small window of her apartment. The morning sun was just beginning to brighten the city skyline. Somewhere out there, millions of people had watched her play. Somewhere out there, Thomas Wright was waiting for her answer. She thought about the last 3 years, the grief of losing her mother, the financial struggles, the slow process of building a new life for herself. She thought about her small apartment with its electronic keyboard that she rarely touched. She thought about the Ivory Room, about serving plates and memorizing wine lists and making herself invisible, and she thought about how it had felt last night, when her fingers touched real piano keys again, when the music had poured out of her after so long. Her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed a name she hadn't seen in years. Dr. Rivera, her former professor from the conservatory. Hello? She answered hesitantly. Lily Chen, came the familiar voice, warm with affection and excitement. My most brilliant student playing Rachmaninoff in a restaurant in her waitress uniform. Only you could pull off something so dramatic. Despite herself, Lily smiled. Dr. Rivera had always been able to make her smile, even during her most stressful periods at school. It wasn't planned, she said. The best performances rarely are, Dr. Rivera replied. They come from necessity, from the heart. And yours certainly did that, she paused.
Lily, where have you been?
What happened? One day you were a rising star with the fellowship in your pocket, and the next you were gone. Lily moved back to sit on the edge of her bed. My mother got sick, she said simply. Cancer, stage 4. The treatments weren't covered by insurance. I had to choose. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, Lily, Dr. Rivera finally said. I wish you had told us. The school has emergency funds for situations like that. We could have helped. Maybe, Lily acknowledged. But at the time, I couldn't think about anything except my mom. And after she died, it just seemed too late. The fellowship had gone to someone else. My apartment near school was rented to new students. Everyone had moved on. Not everyone, Dr. Rivera said firmly. And it's never too late, not with talent like yours. Which brings me to why I'm calling. I assume you've heard from Thomas Wright. His assistant emailed. They want me to come to Symphony Hall today. Good, go. Listen to what they have to offer. But before you make any decisions, I want you to know that the conservatory would welcome you back with open arms. We could arrange a special scholarship. You could complete your degree, Lily. Lily's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Say you won't disappear again. Say you'll remember that music isn't just something you do, it's who you are. We all saw that in the video, Lily. The whole world saw it. After ending the call with Dr. Rivera, Lily sat for a long time on the edge of her bed, her mind racing with possibilities that just 24 hours ago would have seemed impossible. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, but she ignored it as she got up and moved to the small closet in the corner of her studio apartment. Pushing aside her waitress uniforms and everyday clothes, she reached for a garment bag in the back, the one thing she had, kept from her previous life. Inside was the dress she had worn for her fellowship audition 3 years ago, a simple but elegant black dress that her mother had helped her choose. She had kept it even when selling most of her other possessions, unable to part with this last connection to that day, to her mother's pride, to the future she had once imagined for herself. She laid it on the bed, smoothing out the wrinkles with a gentle hand. Then she went to the shower, letting hot water wash away the last traces of sleep as she tried to prepare herself for whatever this strange new day might bring. As steam filled the small bathroom, Lily found herself humming the opening notes of Rachmaninoff's concerto, the same piece that had changed everything last night. For the first time in 3 years, the music didn't bring pain or regret. Instead, it felt like a conversation with her past self, like a bridge between who she had been and who she might become. By the time she emerged from the shower, She had made her decision. She would go to Symphony Hall. She would meet with Thomas Wright. She would listen to whatever offer he might make, but first, she had one more important stop to make. An hour later, dressed in the black dress that still fit perfectly, Lily stood in the peaceful quiet of the cemetery, looking down at her mother's simple headstone. She had brought fresh flowers, peonies, her mother's favorite, and placed them carefully in the small vase embedded in the stone. "Something happened, Mom," she said softly to the quiet air. "Something I didn't expect. I played again. Really played." She smiled, remembering her mother's face the first time she had performed the Rachmaninoff piece at a student recital. "People heard me. A lot of people." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the maple tree that shaded her mother's grave. Lily took it as a sign to continue. "I'm not sure what happens next. There are opportunities coming, big ones, I think. I'm scared. It's been so long and I've worked so hard to build this new life, this safe life." She paused, wiping away an unexpected tear. "But I remember what you always told me, about music being a gift we're meant to share, about how playing just for ourselves is only half of what the gift is for." She reached out and touched her mother's name, carved into the cool stone. "I think maybe it's time for me to share again." As Lily stood there in the morning sunshine, her phone buzzed in her purse with another call. This time, when she looked at the screen, she didn't hesitate to answer. "Hello, this is Lily Chen," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, I can be at Symphony Hall at noon. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it." 6 months later, Lily stood in the wings of Lincoln Center, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The black concert dress she wore was new, custom-made for this evening, worlds away from the waitress uniform she had worn that night at the Ivory Room. But as different as everything seemed on the surface, she felt the same flutter of nerves, the same momentary doubt. 5 minutes. "Ms. Chen," a stagehand whispered, giving her an encouraging smile. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. Through the narrow gap in the curtains, she could see the packed concert hall. Every seat was filled. In the front row sat Thomas Wright, looking proud and slightly smug, as if he had discovered a rare gem that everyone else had overlooked. Beside him was Dr. Rivera from the conservatory, elegant in a deep blue dress, her silver hair gleaming under the lights and scattered throughout the audience, as if Thomas had deliberately placed them for maximum emotional impact, were the staff and regular customers of the Ivory Room. Peter was there in an obviously new suit. May sat beside him, already clutching tissues in anticipation. Even Vincent had come, fully recovered from his heart scare and genuinely delighted that his illness had inadvertently changed the course of Lily's life. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. After meeting with Thomas Wright that day at Symphony Hall, Lily had been offered a special position with the orchestra. Not quite a fellowship, but something created specifically for her. A chance to practice with world-class musicians, to study with renowned teachers, to prepare for this night. Her debut as a featured soloist. Of course, the viral video had been both a blessing and a challenge. Everyone wanted to interview the Waitress pianist. Morning shows, evening news, online publications, radio stations, all clamoring for the heartwarming story of talent rediscovered. Lily had done a few carefully selected interviews, enough to promote tonight's concert, but not so many that she became overwhelmed. Social media had exploded with reactions to her story. Young musicians shared how inspired they were, how her journey gave them hope when they faced their own obstacles. Parents posted videos of their children practicing piano with renewed determination. Even celebrity pianists had weighed in, praising her technique and emotional depth. Through it all, Lily had tried to keep her focus on the music, not the attention. She practiced 8 hours a day, rebuilding the stamina and precision she had lost during her years away from performance. Her fingers developed calluses again. Her posture readjusted to the demands of the concert grand. Her mind relearned how to hold entire complex pieces in perfect memory. There had been moments of doubt, of course, late nights when she wondered if she was foolish to think she could step back into this world after so long away. Days when her playing fell short of her own expectations. Hours when she missed the simplicity of carrying plates and taking orders, when no one had known her name or expected greatness from her. But then she would remember that night at the Ivory Room, the pure joy that had coursed through her when she played without planning or preparation, just letting the music flow through her. That joy had been missing from her life for too long. 2 minutes, the stagehand whispered. Lily nodded again, closing her eyes briefly. In her mind, she saw her mother's face, not sick and pale as she had been at the end, but vibrant and proud as she had been at Lily's first major recital. Music is meant to be shared, she had always said. Tonight, Lily would share it with the largest audience of her life. The conductor appeared beside her, extending his hand. Ready? Ready, Lily confirmed, surprised to find that it was true. The nerves were still there, but beneath them was a solid foundation of preparation and purpose. They walked onto the stage together, into the bright lights and thunderous applause. The applause grew even louder as people recognized her, not just as a talented pianist, but as the waitress from the video that had touched millions. Lily bowed, then settled herself at the gleaming concert grand piano. Her fingers found their position over the keys, familiar and right. She exchanged a nod with the conductor, took a deep breath, and began. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the concert hall, the same piece she had played that night at the Ivory Room, but now with the full orchestra behind her, supporting and elevating the music to its intended grandeur. As she played, Lily felt herself entering that special state that only music could create, a place where time both stretched and compressed, where she was intensely present yet somehow outside herself. Her fingers moved with precision built from thousands of hours of practice, but the emotion flowing through the music came from somewhere deeper, from every joy and heartbreak she had experienced, from every moment that had led her to this stage. The first movement built to its climax, her hands dancing across the keys in perfect partnership with the orchestra. As the final notes of the movement hung in the air, she allowed herself a quick glance at the audience. She saw faces leaning forward in their seats, expressions of wonder and appreciation. She saw Thomas Wright nodding in satisfaction. She saw May wiping away tears, and for just a moment she imagined her mother sitting among them, eyes shining with pride. The second movement began, more reflective and tender. Lily poured into it all the quiet moments of her life, mornings at her mother's bedside, afternoons practicing alone in empty classrooms, evenings wiping down tables after closing time at the Ivory Room. The music transformed these ordinary moments into something luminous and meaningful. By the time she reached the third movement, with its driving energy and ultimate triumph, Lily was no longer thinking about technique or memory or the audience watching her. She was simply living within the music, allowing it to express what words never could. The journey from darkness to light, from loss to redemption, from silence to sound. The final chords resounded through the hall, and Lily's hands lifted from the keys. For a moment, complete silence followed. That magical pause when an audience is so moved they forget to applaud. Then the concert hall erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding with an intensity that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Flowers appeared on stage, tossed by admirers. The conductor extended his hand to Lily, helping her to her feet for a bow. As she straightened, she saw that even the orchestra members were applauding her, some wiping away tears. This validation from fellow musicians, people who understood exactly what it took to perform at this level, touched her deeply. After multiple curtain calls, Lily finally made her way off stage, legs slightly wobbly from adrenaline and emotion. In the wings, a small crowd had gathered. Thomas Wright, Dr. Rivera, and to her surprise, Peter and May from the Ivory Room. That was beyond words, Thomas said, clasping her hand in both of his. Absolutely beyond words. Dr. Rivera simply hugged her, whispering, "Your mother would be so proud." Peter looked slightly out of place in this backstage world, but grinned broadly. "I'm telling everyone I know that you used to work for me," he joked. "My claim to fame." May bounced on her toes, excitement radiating from her. "The internet is going crazy again," she reported, holding up her phone to show Lily the trending topics. "Lily Chen debut is #1 worldwide." Lily smiled at them all, feeling a strange blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. "Thank you," she said simply. "All of you. For different reasons, but thank you." A young stagehand approached, holding a small package. "This was left for you at the stage door, Ms. Chen. The gentleman said you'd understand." Puzzled, Lily accepted the package and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small worn metronome, one she recognized immediately. It had been her mother's, sold years ago along with most of their possessions to pay for medical bills. On the bottom was the familiar scratch mark from when Lily had dropped it as a child. A note accompanied it. Found this in an antique shop. The owner told me its history and I knew it had to come back to you. Music finds its way home eventually. Vincent! Tears filled Lily's eyes as she cradled the metronome. It was such a small thing, really. Just wood and metal and mechanical parts. But it represented something precious. Continuity, connection, the thread that tied her past to her present. Later that night, after the reception and congratulations and countless handshakes, Lily returned to her new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with large windows and, most importantly, room for the baby grand piano that now dominated the living space. She kicked off her formal shoes, hung up her concert dress, and changed into comfortable clothes. Then she sat at the piano. Not the concert grand from Lincoln Center, but her own instrument, the one she practiced on daily. She placed her mother's metronome on top but didn't turn it on. Instead, she simply rested her hands on the cool keys and felt the events of the day settle around her. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress with a buried talent and a silenced passion. Now she was a concert pianist with a debut at Lincoln Center, a recording contract, and a calendar filled with future performances. But more important than any of those external changes was the internal one, the reconnection with the part of herself she had tried to lock away. The music had always been there, waiting patiently for her to find her way back to it. Lily began to play, not Rachmaninoff this time, but a simple piece she had composed herself in the past few months. It told the story of her journey, from loss to rediscovery, from silence to sound. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt perfectly balanced between her past and her future, between memory and possibility. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, people were still talking about her performance, sharing clips online, telling her story. Somewhere out there, perhaps another musician was finding the courage to pick up an instrument after too long away. And somewhere, Lily believed, her mother was listening. As the final notes of her composition faded into the quiet apartment, Lily smiled. The waitress who stepped to the piano had found her way home. After multiple curtain calls, Lily finally made her way off stage, legs slightly wobbly from adrenaline and emotion. In the wings, a small crowd had gathered. Thomas Wright, Dr. Rivera, and to her surprise, Peter and May from the ivory room. That was beyond words, Thomas said, clasping her hand in both of his. Absolutely beyond words. Dr. Rivera simply hugged her, whispering, "Your mother would be so proud." Peter looked slightly out of place in this backstage world, but grinned broadly. "I'm telling everyone I know that you used to work for me," he joked. "My claim to fame." May bounced on her toes, excitement radiating from her. "The internet is going crazy again," she reported, holding up her phone to show Lily the trending topics. "Lily Chen debut is #1 worldwide." Lily smiled at them all, feeling a strange blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. "Thank you," she said simply. "All of you. For different reasons, but thank you." A young stagehand approached, holding a small package. "This was left for you at the stage door, Ms. Chen. The gentleman said you'd understand." Puzzled, Lily accepted the package and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small worn metronome, one she recognized immediately. It had been her mother's, sold years ago along with most of their possessions to pay for medical bills. On the bottom was the familiar scratch mark from when Lily had dropped it as a child. A note accompanied it. "Found this in an antique shop. The owner told me its history and I knew it had to come back to you. Music finds its way home eventually." "Vincent!" Tears filled Lily's eyes as she cradled the metronome. It was such a small thing, really. Just wood and metal and mechanical parts. But it represented something precious. Continuity, connection, the thread that tied her past to her present. Later that night, after the reception and congratulations and countless handshakes, Lily returned to her new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with large windows and, most importantly, room for the baby grand piano that now dominated the living space. She kicked off her formal shoes, hung up her concert dress, and changed into comfortable clothes. Then she sat at the piano. Not the concert grand from Lincoln Center, but her own instrument, the one she practiced on daily. She placed her mother's metronome on top but didn't turn it on. Instead, she simply rested her hands on the cool keys and felt the events of the day settle around her. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress with a buried talent and a silenced passion. Now she was a concert pianist with a debut at Lincoln Center, a recording contract, and a calendar filled with future performances. But more important than any of those external changes was the internal one, the reconnection with the part of herself she had tried to lock away. The music had always been there, waiting patiently for her to find her way back to it. Lily began to play, not Rachmaninoff this time, but a simple piece she had composed herself in the past few months. It told the story of her journey, from loss to rediscovery, from silence to sound. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt perfectly balanced between her past and her future, between memory and possibility. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, people were still talking about her performance, sharing clips online, telling her story. Somewhere out there, perhaps another musician was finding the courage to pick up an instrument after too long away. And somewhere, Lily believed, her mother was listening. As the final notes of her composition faded into the quiet apartment, Lily smiled. The waitress who stepped to the piano had found her way home.